Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow the Goalie, the 200th episode. Oh my God, it's been 200 episodes of this show. And don't worry, we're not doing that thing that a lot of podcasts do where they say, this is my favorite moment from our 200th episode. This is our favorite. We're not doing a best of episode because there hasn't been a lot of best of. Well, there has been with this show, but not with the Flyers since we've started doing the show. But we are excited. Episode number 200. If my math is correct, this is episode 66 since Bundy joined. But episode 200 overall that we've done of this show. Really excited. The Flyers season is over. Our national nightmare ended a few months ago or a few weeks ago when Chuck Fletcher was let go. There actually does appear to be some hope on the horizon. We want to get into that. We have some other housekeeping things to, I think, take care of as well. And as we went to hit record today, within, I don't know, a minute before we hit the record button, news broke out of Pittsburgh. Ron Hextall fired by the Pittsburgh Penguins. They missed the playoffs one season. I know it was a long record, but they missed it one season. Hextall out, Burke out, Pryor out. That's decisive leadership. I guess for the Flyers, better late than never on Fletcher. Let me introduce first a man that I've done this show with, I guess, for 200 episodes. I think that we've both been on all 200 no, we've missed one. I missed one. I think I missed one.
Maybe I missed. Keep in mind, I also missed a couple. I mean,
oh, that's right. You had the Rona. There was the time at the 610 studio. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
200 episodes, most of them with the man next to me, Anthony Sanfilippo. Find him on Twitter at @AnSanPhilly. Be honest, did you think we'd ever get to this point?
No. 5 years with you, Russ. That's a jail sentence right there, man.
That's right.
Because that's what it's been. It's been 5 years. We started this. I believe our first episode was our first real episode was the first week of April 2018.
And it was April 1st. It was April Fool's Day. The joke's been on us, buddy.
Ever since the joke's been on us. But yeah, no, it's great. It's awesome. I'm excited that we've reached this milestone, but it's not the last one. We have many more ahead. So good stuff. Oh, and by the way, the hockey season, the Flyers season's over. So that's why you were maybe dancing in the beginning. Like we finally got through yet another terrible year. which if I recall correctly, Bundy, didn't we kind of say that this was what it was going to be all along, right? I mean,
that was going to be my transition there. And it's funny, you're celebrating that the season's over, and here's one of the guys from the show who told you, I don't know, before the season even started that the season was over, and that, of course, is Chris Terrian Bundy. Find him on Twitter at @CTerrian6. How are you doing, you beaut?
I'm doing great, guys. I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, we're the all-knowing gods of hockey. We're not. We're just... But we are with the Flyers. Listen, if you're going to be honest with the fans, and that's one thing I'll take the greatest bit of pride in, is that if you come on here, I might sound angry sometimes. I might be in a good mood. I might be in all kinds of different moods. But what I am saying is that we're never going to lie to you. And from what I see, when I look at the team and guys, I've said, like, we've said this, people sometimes question me. I said, like, they should have started this 5 or 6 years ago. We're in 2023 now. The wheels in motion should have started in 2017. They didn't. All right. We got, as you just said, Hextall. There's so many moving parts in all this, guys, like going back to GMs, to regime changes, to new GMs, to the bullshit that's come out of a lot of different pipelines trying to spin this. I'm proud that we didn't spin it. We never did. It wasn't because we didn't want the team to do well. There's nothing I want to see more than 20,000 people in the building every night and a chance for a parade on Broad Street, and to maybe even sneak on the back of one of the backs of those fire trucks if I can. But you know what? Like, I just feel like that the way it went in the summer, like we did nothing last summer. There was no valuable moves. The draft again, they picked high. And they got a kid that they think is going to be a bright part of the future. But when you're picking fifth, you're going to get something, that's the way it is. But, for people to have gone through what they did and have bullshitted, I think, the fans from a lot of other platforms, I think that's shameful. You're never going to be able to look me in the face with any kind of honesty and say that you were telling the truth, because you weren't. You were doing it for your own agenda. And I'm going to say this, and Anthony knows it too. The more truth you tell, and the more integrity you have in these jobs or whatever it is, better things will come back to you at the end of the day for having the fortitude of being honest. And there's a reward for that. I know that. So, it's been the thing, guys. I know we shape shift every week, and I go on Twitter and I break balls sometimes, whether it's other people. Most of everyone's my friends on Twitter. I like everybody. But this has been a good thing for me. Congratulations to you guys. You guys are the ones that started to get us to this point. I was happy to jump in when I wanted a platform to continue talking hockey, and you guys provided that. This is your show, guys, and I'm proud to have jumped on the back end of it, and real proud to have a platform to talk. But I think the best part about it is we have integrity, and that shines through the articles we write, the Anthony stuff you do, the communications you have. Russ, you doing a lot of falling in more of a mediator role now, like a guy with the delivery. I think everybody has a good spot, and still injecting your own personality into the show. So it's pretty unique, guys. I like it. It's interesting, but it's bullshit free. And that's the best part about it, because when you turn this on, I want everybody to know you may not agree with my opinion or Russ's or Anthony's, but it's our opinion. It's no one else's, and it's truthful, and it's always for the betterment of the team down the road, as much as it might hurt in the present. So congrats, guys, to the two of you in 200, and I'm just really proud to be here. I intend to be back again next year.
How about that?
I'll just keep on doing this till someone just tells me I can't do it anymore. It's too much fun once a week.
The wheels fall off. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So you know what? But I think that is, guys. To me, I thank you for letting me talk. I'll hand it to Anthony, but that's the part I want the fans to know: is we do this from the bottom of our heart. We have passion about it. I know I have tons of passion for everything I do in life, but I still have a lot of it for the Philadelphia Flyers and what this looks like moving forward. And I'm glad to have a platform to do it. So. Take it away, boys. It's all yours.
That's a far better monologue than I could have come up with, Russ.
That was really good. He did a nice little boost there for us. That might have to be a future part that just kind of sits on the YouTube.
I didn't want to sound like Jordan Belfort and like the Wolf. I'm not going anywhere. So I wanted to do a little bit more tactful play, guys. So anyway,
which actually reminds me, I brought this up last week. We did a delay, so we're testing some stuff here. We're testing to see how well people can follow directions. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you. Like obviously, we love people who listen to the podcast, but we've seen that uptick in the number of people who watch the show on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/@Snow The Goalie. Now we've picked up enough subscribers there that if you actually just type in Snow The Goalie into the search bar, the channel does pop up now. For a while it wasn't. So subscribe to Snow The Goalie's YouTube account. We're gonna do some fun stuff there this summer. I've kind of started to touch on it a little bit with these guys. There are a few different ways that I think we can kind of continue to build and grow and do some interesting stuff. I fully plan on clipping up old episodes of the show and popping them into the shorts section of YouTube, because I think a lot of that is fun. It goes viral. By the way, I've now learned that because the pro wrestling podcast that I've been working on for a while is like set for launch and has like kind of gone up. It's now called It's Just Wrestling. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, and it's on YouTube and it's everywhere. But I've had like some shorts and some reels on Facebook that have just like blown up. I know pro wrestling's different, but like if I can do that with pro wrestling, I don't know why we couldn't do that with Philadelphia Flyers. So some interesting stuff. So make sure you go follow the account there. I want to throw some numbers at you guys really quick before we get into, the meat and potatoes of this episode and about, kind of putting a bow, I don't know what color bow, but putting a bow on this season. So this is now episode 200. I want to run people back really quickly through like where this thing started. So it was April 1st, 2018. The first guest, if I remember correctly, was Alex Lyon. Was the first interview that Anthony did.
No,
and that was, well, hold on.
Not Alex Lyon.
The first one. We had Hextall.
Travis Sanheim was my first.
Was it Sanheim?
Yes.
Was it? Okay, so yeah. Sanheim was the first one. It was like a 7 or 11-minute interview. I didn't note especially. Okay, so Sanheim was the first. Hextall. We had Hextall on for a while. Hextall kind of laid out a lot of what the plan actually was and how he was going to build the team. And at that point, we started to make some waves in the little Flyers podcast community, all right, where we acknowledge that there are other podcasts, but we're the only Flyers podcast. Alex Lyon was on the show. We had Jordan Wheel on the show, who did give us, I think, still to this day, the best story the guy at the minor league hockey game who chugged a beer out of his prosthetic leg. If you haven't gone back and listened to that episode, that's back. I believe it was episode 16. It might have been episode 17. I think it's episode 17. Go back and listen
That was
to
a
that
great
one.
interview. Yeah.
Hartnell was on. That was when he was getting honored at a game. We interviewed him in like the bowels of Wells Fargo Center. We had Dale Weiss on. The funny thing about the Dale Weiss interview was he said a couple of things that rocked the boat enough that he got released 12 hours later. Like the episode went live. You started getting a few texts from people in the organization.
Yep.
And by the next morning, Dale Weiss was let go. Sorry, Dale. We had Mike McKenna on, who called
guys
himself the
railroaded
biggest
him?
suitcase.
No, he was great.
No,
It was a
Okay.
great interview.
hold on a second. Now I know I said we weren't going to do this with this episode, but in fairness, it is funny.
It was a
Weiss
great
came
interview.
on and said that some guys spend way too much time on Twitter on the bus, worried about what other people are saying, which some people took to mean like Nolan Patrick. But what we all really know is it was Jake Voracek, who's a gutless coward when it comes to social media, who blocked, I don't know how many thousands of Flyers fans, blocked media. He might be a nice guy. I have no idea. The guy blocked me, like, I don't know, the first year we did this podcast. Very strange, just weird behavior by a multimillionaire, but whatever. Live your life.
Never blocked me, by the way.
Well, of course he didn't. You're a brown noser. So McKenna was on the show, the biggest suitcase in the game. We had Scott Gordon on when he was the interim coach. That's actually an interview that I think has stood the test of time because so many of the points that he touched on about connecting with this generation's players is what you're starting to hear more in the mainstream now. That was a really fun interview that we did. We had Bob Clark on who talked about beer and golf and
Beer.
it's just a lot of beer. A lot of beer. Having a beer. We had Homer on. We had Homer on at one point. I think he came on twice, but he came on once back in 2019. We did a crossover episode with Stick to Hockey. We had Bill Meltzer on. We did that Flyers Roundtable, the podcast and media roundtable at one point. Frank Saravalli was on. Mertitas hopped on. Vigneault was on. That was a fun interview. That was a good one. And that's, I believe, also still on YouTube as well. We had Riley Cote on before he joined Nasty Knuckles. That was a show. JVR joined us from the tarmac when the team was getting ready to fly out somewhere when we were doing the show on 610. By the way, I think when we did the show on 610, Anthony, I think we did 20 episodes. It might have been 16, but we did it from the fall up until the new year, just before pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So I think it was about 16, 20 episodes, something like that. You can go back and listen to us, banter with our old producer, Ryan Lennox. We had Niskanen was on the show. Konechny came on the show. Farabee, who I think eventually came on 2 or 3 times. Like Colby Cohen came on when he was still working with the network. He popped over into the 610 studio. That was either when you were dying of COVID
That's
or
when I was,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he show off his ring?
I don't remember if he was wearing the ring. I remember he came in.
Anthony,
I thought he was.
He filled in for me in studio. Yes.
Yeah, did
we
he have
had
his ring on?
I was on a deathbed. You'd have to ask Russ.
I don't think Anthony understands the reference, so we're just gonna keep going. Scott Lawton did an interview with Anthony, as did Derek Grant in the locker room. That was also pre-COVID.
That was
Had to be pre-COVID.
That was
Yeah.
pre-COVID. Yeah.
Let's see. We had Prop came on, Knuble came on. That was the summer that we had all of the former Flyers on. We had Dave Isaac was on. Deneen came on. Peter Luco. That was an interesting one. We had Chief Craig Berube on. Hitchcock, Bundy's favorite coach, came on. Poulin was on. Briere. This is before, obviously, Briere took the role that he did. We had Pronger on. Sharp. NRD. What?
That Pronger interview, I believe, was one of our highest rated. I think that was one of the ones that got up to number 5 nationwide when we were
I think that was
tracking it. Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Derek Settlemeyer on before he started on Nasty Knuckles. We had Keith Primo on. And then things started to change a little bit. So things started to pivot.
The Primo one, keep in mind, was a very, very it was a great interview. I would recommend people go back and listen to it because there were 2 great things about that. One, where he talked about, he actually broke down on the show, if you remember, Russ, where he was crying a little bit about, the end of his career. But even more so, he talked about how Nolan Patrick should stop playing hockey.
Yep.
Which was a real fascinating thing. And then lo and behold, a year and a half later, he's not playing hockey anymore, right? So
yeah,
it was a really fascinating interview.
Yeah, and just to be clear, he didn't say Nolan Patrick needs to stop playing. He said if these are the certain criteria, if all like pretty much if he can't live a decent, healthy, happy life away from the ice, he shouldn't be playing. And you're right. He broke down. He cried on that episode. Like it was like kind of bared his soul, which was I don't know. And I think that was one of those moments where we looked at each other and we're like, I think we're doing something right here.
Bundy, was he that type of guy with you guys in the locker room? Was he that kind of open and honest and emotional? Or was that something that came up after the fact?
No,
yeah,
not at all. To be honest with you, yeah, like I'm not. I liked, he was a good teammate. He was a heck of a hockey player when he got going. Like he was, very, very impactful. But no, that was not part of it. He was more of he's a captain. He was more of a one voice type of leader.
Mm-hmm.
It was just different. I mean, there's different types of captains. There's some captains that say, but I he was good. He was a good leader.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know.
But he wasn't a guy to cry in the room like in front of the team. Never. So it's obviously impacted. I have no problem. Like, listen, guys. I mean, after what I've gone through in my life, everybody has ups and downs and stuff, and you come out the other side of it. But I know the concussion stuff. Like I had concussions too, lots of them. It impacted my hockey, end of my career, into my afterlife while I was still going through a lot of other things. So, but I know how much the concussions meant to Keith, and how much it impacted his life afterwards. So there's a lot of guys that's been like that, but no, he wasn't like that. It's funny when you mentioned Clarkie and Hitch. I'll change it to a little bit of a light tune. When Coatsy actually kind of throws back to Coatsy a little bit here too with his retirement. Congratulations, by the way. I remember once they said Coatsy said I'd like to have Hitch on for Coatsy's corner. And Clarkie said, do they have a corner big enough for Hitch?
He was referencing his ego. His ego is what he was referencing.
Yeah, that's right, Ant, right? Yeah, that's right. Sure, they got he goes, do they have a corner big enough for Hitch?
Oh, man.
We were having a nice family show.
Yeah.
We were. We've now fat shamed.
I just didn't want to forget that.
Bundy hasn't F-bombed yet, though, and we're 17 minutes in, so I think that's a sign of a good week. So
we almost made it last week.
I know, only a matter of time. Yeah. All right, to finish up this, we had there was a time we had Kiprios on, and then the next week we had on Jeremy Roenick, and then we made a pivot. We kind of started getting out of the interview game a bit, and if I remember correctly, the last interview we did that year, that was 2021, in that summer, it was when we had Chuck Fletcher on. And Fletcher told some really interesting stories, including getting in a fist fight as a kid, which there was a moment where I was like, you know what? This guy might send our team to hockey hell, but like there might be a fighter in this guy after all. There wasn't. And then this is where things changed. Episode 121, I believe it was. I kind of glossed over this. Episode 121 is when Bundy came on for the first time. That's when we started planting the seeds of like what could be down the line. We started to kind of, I think, maintain a little bit of communication. And then it was episode 134 is when Bundy officially came on board. That was September 1st of 2021. And it's been rainbows and smiles ever since. I would say in the grand scheme of things, this show changed for the better when Bundy came on board. Bundy added a new element to the show. I think it took us a little bit of time to find the balance here. And I still think it's my fault and probably my responsibility to get Bundy more involved on this show.
You know what, though, guys? Can I say something? I really, honestly, God, like I've worked with partners in radio and TV. And like me and Tim Saunders, he would challenge me when I first started a little bit because I was new. And I think he realized pretty quick, like I was on point. Maybe didn't always look like I was, but I was always on point. The TV was entirely different. But this has been, I'll be honest with you, the chemistry that we built, I mean, it was pretty much as easy as anything that I've gone through in broadcasting and the way that everyone morphed into things. I will say this to the fans. We're not opposed to doing anything that you guys want. If you want to have more of a player interview back, sometimes I'm all for that. I think what happened was, and Anthony knows this, I came in an era before, and I'll say this, and I think most of my teammates would say it, I was kind of the end of an era before social media came in. I believe, and Anthony, you know this, if there was social media when I played, I have a feeling there would have been a lot of social media on my back in the time that I played. Right. I was the guy in the locker room that was a lot of the life of the party. I enjoyed that being part of it. I mean, Clark brought me back his last year to keep the room light a lot of ways. They weren't sure what the chemistry was like in 2005-6. So I think what it is people get a glimpse of what it was then. We had a lot of big personalities, on that team, funny guys, and everybody was different. It's no different than building a podcast team or a radio team or a TV broadcast team. Everybody's different, and you have to find a way to morph those together. But yeah, in my playing days, I put it in a book. There's a lot of guys like Jonesy said, if there's any, I don't read books, but if there's any book I'd read, it will be Bundy's. so I think, that's why I think that there was an understanding coming in that there'd be a little bit more flair for storytelling, some comedy stories that I added to it, but it's no different. And I say that because we love having players on or coaches, to ask them about different things. And I think it's important. So, we go with how the fans think a lot of ways. And try to do the job for them while also keeping things light but serious when we have to go in that direction as well.
I agree. I think that there's a good chance that this summer we'll look to do a few interviews. Bundy, I think there are a few teammates of yours that I'd be interested in hearing from this offseason, including some who listen to the show. I just think that there's a little bit of meat on that bone. And it's one of those things that I think people really look forward to, especially in the summer when you're trying to, I don't know, like this is the thing that I struggle with the Philly fan base, especially with the Flyers fan base. I maybe it's just me. I assume that everyone who's a Flyers fan is also like a Phillies fan, and that like they might be budding Union fans in the summer because the team's good, and that when the season starts up, they're going to be Eagles fans, and they might also check in on the Sixers. But like I have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that like for some people, when the Flyers season is over, that's it for their sports fandom until the next Flyer season starts. Now, I'm not sure how big that group is anymore, but there are people like that. So I feel like it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that we stay consistent throughout the summer and that we bring those kind of like special attractions to kind of keep things interesting for those fans. Because if you're not a Phillies fan or if you're not a fan of any of the summer sports, like that probably does suck for a few months when things just kind of go dormant. So we're going to do our best, I think, to keep those people engaged. You mentioned something earlier, Bundy, that I think we should probably address. We've always been forthright, and I think we've always been pretty honest about our opinion when it comes to how this team is covered, not just by us, but by others. There are like people and there are shows and there are people on Twitter who subtweet or who, reference, they never name because they don't want to run the risk of there being a receipt for people to point back to. It's kind of gutless and a loser way to live, but there are people who do it. And then there are people who like actually do call people out by name. And there are people who take fans to task or other media to task. And what we saw going into this year is something that I want to revisit. Last year, in the preseason, leading into the season, the Flyers did their little round table. It was the radio, TV, and I believe like the podcast network people sat around a table. So there was like Coatsy and there was Jim Jackson. I think Tim Saunders was on there. Martinez
like
was
an
on there.
SNL skit. It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It did.
I don't remember who else was on it. I feel like there was one more person. I genuinely don't remember. And one of the things that stuck out that we talked about at the time was we looked at this team going into the season and said, this isn't a good team. And this is even, I believe, before it had been publicly confirmed. We talked about on the show that Sean Couturier was going to miss significant time, that Cam Atkinson could miss time, that Farabee wasn't expected back until December, like all those things. And we said, this team isn't good. And Chuck didn't do a very good job of building this team. And we were very loud about it. And there are our fans, to their credit on social media, are very loud and vocal about the things that we say. And that roundtable largely rejected the notion that this team wasn't going to be good and pretty much said like fans don't know what they're talking about and that there are some media people who are trying to be sensationalist. I had been called, what the hell was the word? Disingenuous, that my takes on the team were disingenuous. When we look back on it now, we were very correct about this team. Yes, there were a few other injuries that caused some problems, but this wasn't a good team. And even with John Tortorella raising their floor, it wasn't a good team. So we were right about that. They weren't. I don't expect them to come out and publicly apologize for being wrong. But I do have to bring up this point and ask you guys where you're at. I think it's hard for a fan base when you are told things aren't as bad as some people are saying. It's like sticking your fingers in your ears. And I don't want to go as far as to say like state-sponsored propaganda, but like when you tell people that like what they very clearly see is not a good hockey team, and you go out and say, no, it's actually, people don't understand what they're talking about. It's fine. When you do that enough, when you cry wolf that way enough, it does become harder to get fans to honestly believe and buy into when things do turn around. So, Bundy, let me throw this to you first. Do you think there's a chance that because that happened, and because that had happened for a couple of years prior, is it going to be harder for the team, the organization, whatever, to convince people that they are for real when that moment does come?
Well, it depends who's messaging for you, right? Like, I mean, I've, like part of the issue, it's this is a really multi-layered thing, and Anthony could probably help me with this one as well. I'll use Hextall, actually. We'll go back to Hextall really quick. All right. We'll talk about him with the players, okay? And the players that he had coming here. So the players that he drafted and brought in, he kept selling this bit to Philadelphia. Oh, the kids are on the way. They're coming. The kids are here, and it's a new era for Flyer hockey. Yeah, the kids came. But the kids weren't as good as the next group's kids that was on another team. Let's say a younger group that had already been playing. So there was always that gaslighting. I didn't like that, and I knew it at the time. I'm like, okay, like, am I watching the same thing? Then you listen to the broadcasts every night, and you have a broadcaster selling Provorov like he's Raymond Bourque in 1985. That's not fair to the player. That's not fair to the organization, especially when the player does not live up to the expectations that somebody's trying to sell. So there's a whole group of things that go together in it. And that's why I always felt, just be honest. Even if some fan doesn't want to hear it or the organization doesn't want to hear it, if you lie to your fans or you oversell what you think you have, or maybe it's not as good as you're trying to sell, that's a problem. Because now you've lied to the fan base, you've gaslighted them, you've made your broadcasters look like fools because they're selling the same message. And in turn, that will come back on you. So I don't know, guys. You know what? The last game I ever did as a part of that organization with the Flyers at NBC was the Game 7 against the Islanders. That was one of the most pathetic games I've ever seen in my life. And I said it live on post-game after. Maybe somebody didn't like that. But was I going to tell you guys, oh, you know what? After that game, you know what, guys? They had a bad night tonight. And everything's going to be fine. Let's pretend it didn't happen. We're going to go in the next season with Pegasus wings and we're going to fly through the sky. It's bullshit. It's a lie. So whether I got fired for being honest about it, at least the fans know that you're not going to get bullshitted here. But if you have people going out and saying, oh, man, look at these kids. These kids are great. They're okay. They're good, but they're not better than 7 or 8 other teams' kids. Or 12 or 14 other teams' kids. So that's the part that I hated the most. It's gone back years. It's probably gone back to when Hextall was starting to pick higher in the first round. And then started gaslighting and overselling, using the media in the city to do it. That's what happened.
And
that's exactly what happened. And Anthony knows that's what happened too. And now what's happened is you've got other people.
It didn't end with Hextall.
They're on the back of everyone else now. So then you got everyone else scared out of their minds that maybe they're going to get axed to the back door because they said something negative. Tell the truth. Don't lie to the fans about a team that's shitty that you're saying is good. Because even the most average fan knows in this city what real hockey is. So if you're going to go out and you're going to mushroom cloud everything and tell everyone it's something it isn't, you're going to get picked off in this town for it. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
Bundy's right. He's absolutely right. And the thing of it is that with each mistake that they realized that they were making, rather than correct it, they tried a cover your ass move. They try to cover your ass move. That's that laugh, for those of you who aren't watching YouTube, is Russ just put up a little thing on the screen, so you gotta
this is why you have to subscribe to the YouTube channel.
This is why I love being here, guys.
YouTube.com/@SnowTheGoalie.
But no, so it was what it was that each subsequent decision was a cover your ass move.
Yes.
to prevent the message that they were sending to the fans from looking wrong. And that's what it was. And it got progressively worse and worse and worse until they could no longer cover their ass, until it became so apparent that it was as bad as it was, that we are where we are now. And the changes had to be made where, with everything in the front office. And this is the bill is coming due for all of these bad decisions at the current moment. So Bundy's right on. And I would, the only thing I can do to further it is just say that. Like, I mean, the kids were coming and they weren't good enough. So we need to add people to kind of make them look better. And you kind of got away. Like, I'll give you an example, like Provorov, and we've talked about this 6 million times, right? Okay, well, we brought in Matt Niskanen, and Matt Niskanen made Provorov look really good. And then Matt Niskanen retires, and you don't have anybody to make Provorov look as good, right, playing next to him. And then Provorov goes back down again, and is now turns out to be more of a second, probably a really good 3 and a low end 2 is what Provorov is at this point. Okay, that's what it's become, because you covered it by bringing in the right person, but then once he left on his own volition, you didn't have someone to replace him, and so then it made the other player worse. And then you just try to pretend that you can get by with that, and you can't.
By the way, and not to interrupt, but like that president of hockey ops who watched that good player walk away, if you remember that offseason, said that when Niskanen told him that he was done on his way back from the bubble, and they talked while he was on the road, that Chuck said, well, take some time to think about it. As if like, no, buddy, he's not coming to the altar. Like he's gone. He got in his car and he went the other way.
Yeah. The only thing I can, and I don't want to, I mean, obviously it worked out that was the case, that he was not coming back and was never planning on coming back. But I will say that, there are times in pro sports at the end of a season, especially at the end of a long season, where a player's like, gets it, I'm done. And then they tell the management always going to say, hey, just take some time, think about it, let us know. And then they may come back. They may change their mind, right? So I think that's what Chuck was hoping for certain. It just turned out that Niskanen was like, yeah, no, I'm good, thanks, and walked away. But I mean, you could go through any number of machinations, starting with, okay, Nolan Patrick, it was the wrong pick. Okay, great. So let's cover that. Let's cover our ass and sign Kevin Hayes. Okay, that was a bad signing, right? So what are we going to do to fix that problem? Right. And they never really did. And they never, they were like, well, we'll trade for this guy, or we'll bring in this guy, and, they'll work together and we'll make it figured. No, it just never came to be. And it's just, now you've reached the point where one bad mistake leads to another bad mistake, leads to, oh shit, we have to blow this whole thing up and kind of start over. And I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, I think, if we're looking ahead, I know that we've been doing a lot of looking back in the first half hour of this pod, but if we're looking ahead at this point, I think one of the things that's going to be really surprising to a lot of fans is just how willing they are to move on from legitimate assets that they have in this team. I like Danny's going to tell the league, we're open for business on anybody. Like any player is available.
Yeah.
There's no one is being protected. And I think that you're going to see some stuff happen. And there's a thought too, and obviously we won't know for another few weeks, because it will ultimately depend on where the Flyers land in the lottery. Most likely spot that they're going to be is 7. That's kind of where they're at right now. They have a 13% chance of moving up to 1 or 2. They have a slight chance of falling back to 8 or 9, but they're probably going to be, 7. That being said, don't be surprised if Danny doesn't try and move up. If Danny doesn't take, trade a player for a pick and then take that pick and combine it with 7 to move up, huh?
Yeah. But if you're talking about, so if you're going to move up, right? You're not going to go.
It depends. It all depends on who falls where. In all honesty,
right? So let's say it is 7, right? Let's say it's 6. It's going to cost you a ton.
They can only be 1,
2, 7, 8, or 9.
1, 2, 7, 8, or 9. Yeah, because that's the principle of getting jumped, right? Because of the 2 lotteries.
They changed
the first and second spot.
Yeah, okay. 1, 2, 7, 8, 9.
Well, what I'm saying is to get into the top 4, which is apparently where your money picks are, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to give up a lot. Like here's what I'm saying is is moving does Travis Konechny and the number 7 pick get you the number 3 pick? Because it sure the hell is not going to get you Bedard. There's no chance.
No, it's not. You're not going up to 1. That's not going to happen. Whoever wins the lottery would be foolish.
Right, they'd be out of their mind. Yeah,
out of their mind, right? Nor do I.
Could we get Chuck Fletcher installed as the GM of whoever the number 1 drafting team is? There is hope.
Nor do I think you get up to 2, because I think Fantilli is on that. I think there's Bedard's on another level, and then I think Fantilli is the next level, and then it goes down to Carlson and Michkov, and then everyone else after that. So I think that there's those tiers. So I don't think you're going to get up to even 2, but could you potentially trade a player and a pick, or trade a player for another pick and then trade 2 picks to jump up from, say, 7 to 3 or 7 to 4? I do think that's a viable possibility. I think teams could consider that and say, you know what, we have so many holes. Like if you're a Chicago, right, and you don't win the lottery, let's just say, and you fall to, and you're 3. Blackhawks have so many holes. Do you sit there and go, well, let's see, the Flyers traded Provorov and they got, a late first rounder out of it. Would we take 7 and 25, let's just say, just random number, to move down 4 spots and get 2 first rounders in this draft, as opposed to just taking Leo Carlson or taking, Michkov, who's still 4 years away from being in the NHL anyway? I mean, like, something like that could very well come to fruition. So I think moving forward, I think we're going to see things happen really quickly. I know it's today, we're recording on April 14th, the morning of April 14th. I would tell you that in the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're obviously going to have a new president of hockey operations. We're going to see a couple of possible deals come out, like things that are being discussed and talked about. And then as you get into the draft, or as soon as the Stanley Cup is over, I think the Flyers are going to be a name that is mentioned repeatedly in a lot of different things, in a lot of moving parts. I think Danny's going to be very active. Let's just put it that way. I think he's going to be a very active general manager in this offseason for sure, to try and get this thing turned around a little bit quicker than, say, 5 to 7 years, maybe 3 to 5, I suppose it's 5 to 7.
So I have to go to this really quick because we just got tagged in it on Twitter.
I just saw the same thing.
I tried not to laugh.
Me
so Tony Androck, who
Androkaitis covers the AHL. Used to cover the Phantoms, yes.
That's not a joke though, the itis. Are you sure? Whatever.
It's Androkaitis. That's his name.
Okay, sure.
I just saw it too, Russ. I'm laughing my ass off.
So, covers stuff for the AHL. He tweeted out just now. Now that the news is official and Ron Hextall is out as Penn's GM, I can report a source told me not to rule out the possibility of Hextall returning to the Flyers' restructured front office, something to keep an eye on during the offseason. How do we say in a nice way, without a Bundy level cursing, there is no fucking chance that Ron Hextall is brought back into the front office with this team?
I think you just said it, and pretty much I mean, I don't want to jump the shark on this, but first of all, the fact that the guy got fired just a couple hours ago, I mean, you think the first call that somebody from the Flyers made was, hey, are you interested in coming back here? I mean, I'm just checking out the timeline on this one, and it's not adding up for me, Ant.
Yeah, no, I think that everybody's jumping the gun with what Androkaitis put out there. And look, he's very well plugged in the AHL circle, so I don't want to make it sound like, this is a total, complete, and erroneous bullshit report. Somebody probably told him something along these lines. There is zero chance that Ron Hextall comes back in any like legitimate capacity at the top of this organization. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Now, that said, could I see a situation where they bring him in to kind of run the Phantoms? Because they want a separate general manager. They don't want it to be, it used to be like an assistant GM was kind of like in charge of the minor league team. Now teams are starting to go to this to this new concept of actually having someone who is based in Lehigh, like it would be based in Lehigh Valley as a general manager of the team, kind of reporting on what the team's doing, like things along those lines. Could I see him maybe doing something in scouting or something along those lines? Yeah. And that's crazy to say, but could I see that? I could see that, but I do not think in any way, shape, or form would he be anywhere near the top of the food chain with this organization.
Yeah,
No.
I agree with that.
You're not expecting him to interview for president of Hockey Ops, huh?
Yeah, it wouldn't.
No.
No.
I'm still trying to get over this, and I don't want to crap on Tony and his reporting.
No, I'm sure he's got
Because I don't
something's told him something, but
yeah, I don't think that he like threw something out there just for the hell of it. Now, at the same time, the idea of putting him potentially in control of the Phantoms is absolutely absurd, and on many
isn't
levels.
McCauley already doing that?
That's no. I mean, that's been the rumor, is that Alan McCauley will be that guy, but it's not. There's nothing that's locked in there. I know Danny is fond of Alan McCauley and likes him, and I think wants to find something for him to do. But I do not think that that is a lock, stock, and barrel kind of situation that Alan McCauley is definitely going to be running the Phantoms. No, I don't believe that. 100%. Could happen, but I don't think it's 100%.
I guess it's probably fair for us to take a moment here to acknowledge anything goofy to come out of the exit interviews that happened today. To this point, as of recording, Ryan Ellis has not had an exit interview this year.
By the way, Cam Atkinson, there was some interesting stuff with his exit interview. It looks like I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Oh, don't worry, I pulled it up, and
Okay.
we're gonna credit Charlie O'Connor here for being down there and getting a lot of these quotes. And if you see something on Twitter that I don't have here, let me know. I want to start off with JVR really quick. We'll get to Atkinson in a second. So JVR, who doesn't have many years left in the NHL, if we're being honest, and I would assume is going to land with a team for next year. But beyond that, like I cannot envision him signing a multi-year deal this offseason. JVR assumes that he won't be back, considering that the team's looking to get younger. And he also admitted that while he loved being a Flyer, the fact that he wasn't traded at the deadline and allowed to try to chase down a Stanley Cup is very disappointing to him, or was very disappointing to him. And, I know that we've kind of gone back and forth on the show about, was there a market for him? Wasn't there? All that. On a human level, you feel bad for a guy who very clearly didn't have a place on this team and has very limited time left in the league. And in the past, the Flyers have moved heaven and earth to try to get those kind of guys out and off to chase a cup. Kimmo Timonen is one that comes to mind. I wouldn't put JVR anywhere near the same level as Kimmo, but the team moved heaven and earth to get him onto a cup contender. Ristolainen said that the first half was pretty shit, and then after Christmas, he felt like he found his game, which actually, I want to make sure that we touch on this too. The awards, the end of year awards for the Flyers also came out since we last recorded. He said that he appreciates Tortorella's honesty and said that he does sometimes need a kick in the ass. Kevin Hayes was a little bit interesting. He said that the decisions from the Flyers on his future have probably already been made, and he'll find out around the draft. Certainly sounds like he's giving or lending credence to the belief that there might be a deal in place with Columbus, something that Anthony first brought up around the trade deadline, that Columbus didn't want to make that move at that time because they were tanking, and they also didn't want to pay the money. But it sounds like Kevin Hayes could be on his way out, and said that if this is the end of his time in Philly, he'll cherish Claude Giroux's 1,000th game and playing with Keith Yandel. His top memory was in the bubble when Oscar Lindblom came back for Game 6 of the Islanders series. So that's cool. Those are good moments from Hayes. But the more interesting thing here, probably the most to come out of anything, was Cam Atkinson, who said that he expects to be cleared for contact next week. Charlie tweets that Atkinson choked up when he recalled finally feeling great post-surgery after months of misdiagnoses, hearing that he had a herniated disc, choosing to rehab rather than surgery, going to Columbus to see other people to work on it, and making the call to shut it down. When he was asked about how to go through the injury, or how the injury progressed over time and how they dealt with it, he said, where do I start? And that there were misdiagnoses and going back and forth between here and Columbus.
The way I just kind of to clarify that just a little bit. From what I understand, he had misdiagnoses by doctors here that they were telling him it was just a hernia. Just, I don't want to make it sound like it's a small injury, but just a herniated disc, and that he ended up wanting a second opinion and went to Columbus to see doctors that he knew there that he trusted, probably more than he trusted the doctors here. And when he got there, they basically told him, they said, listen, either you get this surgery or you're gonna. He has a muscle problem in his left arm, where the muscle in his I think it was his triceps atrophied, and that if he didn't get this surgery, he would never be able to play hockey again because he would never get that muscle back to where it needed to be in order to play the game. And that after 3 days after the surgery, like all of a sudden it felt better in his arm. And it was so like immediate, like it had to get done or else his hockey career could have been over. And all along they were just telling him it was a herniated disc when in fact it wasn't, and it was something else, and he needed to fuse a couple of, like, again, I'm not a doctor so I can't get into real specifics about it, but could you imagine what the lawsuit would have been like if he wasn't able to play hockey again because doctors misdiagnosed him? Like, that's fascinating to me. And now you know why you hear Tortorella say things like he said, what was it, 2 weeks ago, when he said that, there were still problems that needed to be cleaned up with the medical team, right? Like, it's like, holy hell, man. Like, you almost cost a guy the remainder of his career. And I don't know how much longer Cam Atkinson plans on playing hockey, whether it's 1 more season, 2 more seasons, 5 more seasons, but you almost cost him the ability to have that potential career by not getting it right.
Yeah.
That's terrible. You can't have that happen. I don't understand. I don't know. I don't understand how things
Crazy,
like that get
crazy
made.
thing about that too is I believe that's after the team moved on from Jim McCrossan and Sal Rafa, who, by the way, we set that GoFundMe up for earlier. There were some nasty people on Twitter when it was announced that they were suing the team and that they were eventually let go. That there were some people who said, well, good, they didn't do a good job. Our players are always hurt. So that was after they moved on, and so it wasn't them. Shocking. Those people can pound sand. Those negative people out there. Cam Atkinson, you have to feel good for on a human level. Here's another human level story. He's got 2 young kids, got a wife. You think about what it would be like to have the game taken away from you, the thing that you've worked your entire life for, and to have a misdiagnosis potentially, derail that and cost you obviously potential financial earnings down the road that are going to give your family financial security long after your playing days are done. Good for him. Seriously, like good for him that they got it figured out. That's a nice little bit of positive news here at the end of the season. I haven't seen anything else that's come out from exit interviews or media day or whatever, but that's a pretty cool thing. At this point, guys, and Bundy, I don't know if there's anything that's like really pressing that you want to hit on here, but the team did announce their end of year awards. There was a little bit of controversy, I guess, about who the team's MVP was and who the best defenseman was. There were a few ballots that were made public, or people who announced, what their selections were for these awards. Who would you guys, and I'll throw this to Bundy first, who would you have made the team MVP, and who would you have selected as the best defenseman this year? I'm just wondering if it lines up with where the awards ultimately went.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, for me, I think the guy, like, I know Carter Hart won it, right? Yeah, he did win it.
Yeah, he won team
I mean,
MVP,
I
and
guess,
Ivan Provorov was named the best defenseman.
yeah, I guess for the workload through the year, Hart did it. Probably I have no problem with that. But I think Konechny had the best year. Certainly, if he didn't have the injury situation, later where he missed a lot of games, it would have probably been a foregone conclusion. But either one of those guys, I think, would have been fine. The defenseman one is weird, for me because, and again, I don't want to trash anybody or take away from the award. I guess probably at the end of the year, I guess it's probably it's like picking the best of the worst of
Mhm.
the year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you saw guys talking about voting for Sealer, Charlie O'Connor voting for York. I mean, to me, Charlie putting that out the other day is a complete slap in the face to the whole defense corps. It is. You got a guy that started in the league as a minors, but I understand what Charlie's saying there. I mean, he might really believe that there's some kind of crazy stat that makes Cam York like MVP of the world, and I don't see it yet. Some analytics number, and that's okay. But I think when you start seeing people mentioning like Sealer or Ristolainen or York as your defenseman, I think it's almost like saying we don't really know who to pick, so we're going to pick the guys that probably played to the best of their ability. The guy who played probably to the most of his ability was Sealer. You know, he probably plays out of his comfort zone, did things, you know, he knows he has to stay. And then, so for me, yeah, I mean, this is the slap in the face award. And it's like, you're going to give it to the guy. It is. It's like, I don't want to say, you can't use that words anymore.
No one was deserving of the award.
No one deserved it. So who do you give it to? You give it to the guy who's the most obscure of the list, because nobody deserved it. And it almost feels like really bad to give it to the guy who's supposed to be the best, because if that's the best, well, no wonder the Flyers are where they are in the standings. So it's all double-edged in every way. You know what I'm saying, Anthony? Like,
Yeah, and I'm happy to reveal my ballot here.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I don't care. I mean, come on. I mean, people tried to kill me last year for not picking Connor McDavid for Hart Trophy. You know, the whole city of Edmonton was like bombarding me on Twitter. So it doesn't, I don't care if I put this stuff out. For Bobby Clark, I voted for Konechny. I know Carter Hart won it. He was my number 2 choice.
mm-hmm.
But I felt like that was more of a toss up, and I get why Carter Hart won it. I just think Konechny was the most important player for this team. Once he went out, the team could not score. Like, I mean, they went into a real bad offensive funk, and I think that was Hart was was the most consistent player all year. But the difference maker for the team between being a competitive team and a non-competitive team was Travis Konechny, and to me, he should have been the Hart Trophy winner and was not. And I agree, Barry Ashby Trophy. I did not even want to vote. I almost left it. I thought about just not submitting it. I really did, because I didn't think there was a deserving candidate. But then I thought, you know what? It is a privilege for me to be there and representing the being a conduit to the fans, and as a result, I felt like it was my duty to at least make a vote. And I voted for the guy who actually won it. I voted for Provorov, not because I felt Provorov was particularly good this year, but when I looked at it and I said, considering the roles that they played and what they were facing night in, night out, who handled themselves, who played the best possible game, I guess, that they could play against what they were playing, considering the totality of the mess that was the Flyers defense. And I felt that, you're still trotting that guy out there 22 minutes a night. He is playing against the best players night in, night out. They were in a number of games. They were in games. Like, they weren't getting blown out of games. I mean, I know Provorov's numbers were down, but they weren't. It wasn't to the point where he was just getting obliterated. Like Travis Sanheim, you would look at his game and you would look at his stats and be like, this guy's getting freaking killed every time he's on the ice.
This guy's Lenny at the end of Mice and Men.
Yeah, and Provorov was not getting killed. He wasn't doing anything exceptional to be better than everyone else, or but he was also not getting killed. So I looked at it that way, and I said, okay. And then I looked at Ristolainen and Sealer, who were my number 2 and number 3 choices on the ballot, and I said, these are guys that are playing well within what they're being asked to do. But if either one of them was asked to do what Provorov is doing, they would be killed on the ice. And so therefore I looked at it from that perspective and said, who else could do what Provorov was doing? And there is no one else on that team who could. And so therefore, by default, for no other reason, I voted for Provorov.
Who would have thought, Anthony, at the end of the year that the two most beautiful Flyer goals of the year would be Nick Sealer's a couple months ago, a month and a half ago, and Provorov's final Flyers goal of the year last night in Chicago? They were, without question, the two best goals in tight by a couple of guys that are defensive players. Should be.
Listen, that Provorov goal was
beautiful.
It was a pot of gold at the end of a big, beautiful rainbow.
It was unbelievable.
Such a beautiful, beautiful rainbow.
By the way,
you could just
cover. I talked about the changes that are going to be coming, and Danny's open to anything. I can almost guarantee at this point that Provorov will not be a Flyer next year. Wow. We'll talk more about it as we get closer to June.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's one of those mystifying ones. I know there's a lot of story to be told in that. There's a lot of meat on that bone. And we don't have enough time because we're coming to the end.
I think what I can say now, and I think we'll flesh out later. What I can say now is both the team and the player want to move on from each other. I think that's a fair thing to say now, that they're both looking to find different opportunities for each other. So, for what that's worth, and I do think I think he's got value, right? I do think that there's some value for him. I think he'll get you something in return. So, yeah, I think Provorov has played his last game for the Flyers.
So this might be crazy. I would have given you and I kind of we went back and forth about this. Konechny missed time and Hart missed time. If we're being honest, the thing that ultimately saved Hart is that Fedotov didn't come over because he would have outplayed him and taken his job. And in fairness, if they had given Ersson the amount of starts they should have, Ersson probably would have taken his job too. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Kidding, but mostly not, but probably am. Konechny was the team's MVP this year, a team that had a hard time scoring. He eclipsed 30 goals for the first time in his career. Bought into Tortorella, is going to be an incredibly hard player for them to move on from. If nothing else, he's one of the rare instances where a player played himself into a position where it could potentially have helped his trade value. Because now, if you're looking at this team from the outside, you're going, all right, if we're going to try to get Konechny, who very much looks like a John Tortorella guy, off of this team, it's going to cost us a lot to do it.
Yeah.
And now and now, I know that, on bad teams, somebody has to score the goals, and like there's that whole thought. But he really played himself into the good graces of the coach, and I think back into the good graces of the fans. There were questions, in the offseason about, could he rebound? Is he ever going to turn into that 30 goal scorer that we all kind of thought he was going to be? So, kudos to him. On the blue line, like that is the ultimate. I don't know how you pick it. The only thing I'll say is I think Ristolainen turned it around. So if you're going recency bias, you could make a case for Ristolainen. You could.
Yeah. But he was still sheltered a little bit. Like he wasn't.
But in fairness, you can only evaluate based on what you're asked to do. Now, and I totally hear the point that you're making about like if you swap A and B, there's no guarantee, or you assume that B is going to play so much worse, and it probably would. That's probably true. But it's just a thought. The interesting thing, and someday artificial intelligence will be able to do this for us much more efficiently. But I would love for all the people who trashed Provorov getting named top defenseman. I would love to cross-reference those people versus the previous years where Provorov has won that award and also not played well that season. And I would be very interested to see how many of those people's opinions have changed based on Provorov with the pregame skate this year. It certainly feels like some of the vitriol about him winning the award didn't have to do with his play on the ice at all, because if you've known what you've been watching the last few years, Provorov really wasn't that much different this year than he has been in years that didn't have Matt Niskanen next to him. It's just all of a sudden the public is against him, or Twitter is against him because of something that happened prior to a game. And by the way, you can be as upset or not upset about it as you want, but like, let's not act like everybody's looking at this from a totally neutral standpoint. So those awards are done. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year.
One last awards thing I wanted to run by you guys. I have to submit my vote for the NHL awards. I am one of the 175 voters who gets the vote for all the major awards except Vezina. They don't allow the media to vote for Vezina for whatever reason. That's voted on by general managers. But it seems like it's a foregone conclusion for all of the major awards this year. And Connor McDavid's probably going to win the Hart. Might be unanimous.
Yeah.
Matty Beniers is going to win the Calder. Bergeron's probably going to win the Selke again. The one that I am having a hard time with is the Norris Trophy, and I figure since we have a former NHL defenseman on the team on the program here on our team, we could talk about what his thought process is here. Everybody's talking about Erik Karlsson being the front runner is probably going to get it. First 100-point season by a defenseman since Brian Leach in '92. And I know plus minus is not a big thing, but how are you a 100-point defenseman? Even though you're on a bad team and you're a minus player.
Yeah.
He's a -3. And how can you sit there and justify that and say, oh, that's the best all-around defenseman in the game? Like I can't in my head. Like I can't sit here and honestly say I can vote for Erik Karlsson. As great as an offensive season as he's had, I don't and the description is best all-around defenseman in the game. I don't how you can say he's the best all-around defenseman when he doesn't play good defense is beyond me.
Yeah, well, so what's interesting with that when you said, and I haven't really paid a lot of attention, but as bad as San Jose's been this year, they have to make something interesting for their fans. So what do? You take the most talented player you have and said, you know what, buddy, I want you to go look like Paul Coffey in 1984 at Edmonton. Mm-hmm. We don't want you to care about defense. I don't even want you to look like you care about it. Go out, put a show on like you've done before. We're an awful team. We're not going anywhere. We'll pick as shitty as we possibly can, but we want you to go out there and absolutely fucking dominate every single night. Get us 100 points. Get us -3. We'll get you the Norris Trophy, and then we'll be able to trade you. You're right. It's not an offensive award. It should be for the most valued player around. It does it in both ends of the ice. So, again, Anthony, it's a weird one because, like Makar won it last year. Like Victor Hedman, to me, is still the best defenseman in the league. When he's won 2 cups, but he's still the all everything, right? He gets the puck out of the zone. He can play power play. He plays 26 minutes, 27 minutes a night. He can play 35 if you want him to. And he's also an absolute stalwart defensively and is an unbelievable skater. That's the best defenseman in the game of hockey. Erik Karlsson had the best offensive production this year. If he's on a really good team that actually cares about the playoffs and winning, you probably would see a guy like that want to get 60 points on a team like that and maybe be a +5. Instead of the other way around. So that's exactly what you're saying is 100% true. It's a nice, wonderful, magical year for him offensively. But what did it get his team? It didn't make his team any better.
Right. And it's like, I've been debating between guys like, for my top vote. I mean, look, I'll put Karlsson. I'm not going to leave him out. We get to pick 5, right? So I'm not going to leave Karlsson out of the top 5.
Sure.
But I look at Fox in New York. I think he's had a great year. He started playing some PK this year too, and did a nice job there with them as well. And Heiskanen in Dallas, really, really upped his offensive game. He's always been a good defensive defenseman, and upped his offensive game this year for the Stars, who I think are a team that could well be in the Stanley Cup final this year.
Sneaky team, they're sneaky.
I look at a guy like that and I say those guys, to me, both of them probably deserve to be considered for the Norris ahead of Karlsson because of their, again, top defenseman with greatest all-around ability is what it says on the vote, on the thing that I have to fill out. So that's the one where I'm probably not going to be on board with the rest of the league voting. But I think that's the one that's going to be the most interesting conversation. Let's put it that way.
I think that's interesting.
Russ, anything? How about you, Russ? Do you have any grievances you'd like to file right now? Anything that's been on your mind through the year? Anyone that's bothered you, rubbed you wrong?
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
Anything you want to close out here in the last few minutes?
I don't want to get in any trouble with anybody. I'm not.
There's no media member who you wanted to put on blast or anything like that today.
No, because what's the point? I could say something. I shouldn't. I don't like when you goad me into this because then I'm going to get a text from somebody in the Flyers organization who's going to, say about how I can't be trusted because I do.
By the way,
I do these things where I go after people. But since Ant, kind of put me up to it, I'm just going to say. No, you know what? Here's the only thing. I have one request. This is me being totally honest, okay? Because I'm not a mean human being. I might be mean on a podcast. I don't know. The people on Twitter, like there was some guy today who said I whine a lot, which might be true. I'll tell you what. When I had surgery a couple weeks ago, I whined. That was not fun. But on Twitter, I don't whine. I tell you that like something's not right. And many times I'm right. So my request to that person, they still haven't fulfilled it as of like 4 hours later, is give me an example of a time where I've gone on Twitter, I've said something about the Flyers or about the way the team's constructed, and I was wrong. Like tell me where I'm wrong. You can't, because usually what's perceived as whining is me saying like some serious truths about the team. There is one person in the Flyers media who made it a point this year to go after my thoughts on the team. And I've already called him out for it. And I've already asked him multiple times, let's have a chat. Let's get on a show together and let's hash this one out civilly. Okay. So to the lawn gnome, all right. All I request of you, as he listens and starts making little fists. Well, that's not very fair there, Russ. I'm not a lawn gnome. Okay. If you're going to accuse somebody of being disingenuous or misleading or not believing what they say, then go toe to toe with them on a podcast. Okay. Don't just like throw it out there. I hate getting DMs from people who listen to his show and then say, oh, he's putting you on blast again. Good. I will encourage people. The summer's about to hit. Go back and clip up our podcast. Go up and clip the propaganda show. And I want you to put the takes about the team side by side. And tell me who was right more often. The person who started this podcast 5 years ago with no real experience in media, or the person who's built their entire career around the Philadelphia Flyers and with exposure on both major radio stations and has, I don't know, like a multiple of 5 followers on Twitter from the guy who started 5 years ago. You tell me who was more correct about the team. I'll sit back and I'll wait. And I mean no ill will. I mean no disrespect. You got to be honest. And it doesn't matter if you work for the team or not. You have to be honest about where this team's at. And Bundy, it comes back to what you said in the beginning. The only thing that matters now for the messaging about this team is the person or the people who are doing that messaging. And if the Flyers were to keep everybody in the same spot, all of the front-facing people the same on radio, on TV, which is really, NBC Sports Philly, but it's still Spectacor owned or Big Comcast owned or whatever, or like through their podcast channels or through like their video content, like all that. If those people all stay the same, there needs to be a conversation about being honest with the fans about what's happening. And you can't have it where the coach says that this is a longer process and the interim GM, who's about to be the permanent GM, says that this is a process. Then that message needs to be echoed by all of the people who are front facing. And when people like us sit back and we analyze the team critically through the summer about how they approach the draft and how they approach the trades and acquisitions and going into the year and how Tortorella's coaching and the training camp and everything. If we are critical, hold us accountable if we're wrong. If we're critical and we're ultimately right, then let us know that we're right. But that's where I'm at. Anthony, did I burn anybody? I don't think I burned anybody too bad.
You did great. You did great, Russ. It was awesome.
I'm trying not to be mean.
You guys want some good news?
I'll be hearing about it, but you did great.
Ice
Wars.
What do you got? Hold on, wait.
Ice Wars is back, boys. Ice Wars is back.
Ice Wars.
That's right.
Yeah. We got a whole new slate. July 15th, we're out in Wyoming, and we're going to start another circuit, a series.
Wyoming?
Yeah, Wyoming, Vegas, maybe Florida is what I'm hearing, some rumblings. But
Wyoming's interesting. Where in Wyoming?
In Cheyenne.
You ever been there?
Ooh.
No, I just hope Yellowstone doesn't blow when I am. Otherwise, we'll be fine.
Wyoming's an interesting and pretty awesome place.
A little small 60,000 person town. So we're going back there to honor our commitment from last year. So a lot of these guys play in leagues, but they're all fired up. I'll be back calling the events. Kind of have a new team in place this year, but we're back, boys. Ice Wars. The last
awesome.
of
I
the
look forward
finest.
to listen. The second we get the invite and the flights all planned out, I'll be very excited. We'll be, do a little road show here. Maybe,
Yeah, we got some more comments. So I just want to throw that out there, and
I like
and
that.
I'll be of course at Northeast Catholic Awards banquet, communion banquet on Sunday morning, which I'm thrilled about. Mike Sealski is actually the Toastmaster General, not the Roastmaster General, the Toastmaster General.
That's awesome.
And and I ended up getting a really great award from a historically amazing place in Philadelphia, and really really proud of that and the work that I've done this year. We haven't stopped. And as I said, I'll finish up with the shameless plug, but bundyrecovery.com, bundyrecovery.com. If you can get that up, Russ, it's an easier way now to reach out to us. And if you need help with anything, addiction or mental health at all, we'll be there for you. And that's just a much easier. There you go. bundyrecovery.com. Much easier way to get a hold of us and have some good stuff going on. So thanks for letting me plug that.
It's really important to note that Anthony and I don't really do anything of value in this world. But Bundy does. Bundy does probably the most important work.
For yourself.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
You don't do much. I
do a lot of volunteerism, my friend. Come on now.
You do. You guys are both good people. I can say
here
that.
We go.
So
No, but listen, Bundy's work in helping people get their lives back and making inroads to, reconnect with themselves and with family and with loved ones and everything like it. It really is fantastic work. bundyrecovery.com.
Thanks, guys.
I think it's really it's great work. You should be commended for it. I know that we tend to give you, your flowers here, but you deserve them.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.
I still want to know why Ant thinks he's going to hear about what I said. I didn't say anything that was too incendiary. I don't know what I did.
It doesn't matter. I'll get a text message or a phone call. What's wrong with your partner? What's wrong with him?
I just spoke truth again. To quote the great Bobby Fish at some random Impact taping a few months ago, folks, where's the lie? Where's the lie? Anyway, I think that's probably an okay spot for us to stop. Don't forget, Snow the Goalie episode number 200. We have survived 200 episodes. Anthony survived almost dying from COVID.
Yeah.
Twice now or once.
Oh, the second one.
Hold on. Really quick. Before we leave, I want to think about where life was. Where was life when we started the show versus where we are now? So that was April 1st of 2018. I had 2 kids. Now I have 4. I was still a teacher. I'm not anymore. Anthony almost died of COVID. Didn't. Oversaw the production of multiple great shows at the Players Club of Swarthmore. Anthony got engaged. We added Bundy. Bundy started a recovery center.
Yeah, I got fired. Then I opened a recovery center. Right. Came on with you guys. This rest is history.
A lot's happened in 5 years. It really has.
That's a lot. That is good. You know what? We've all done well. We've all glowed up in our lives. So good on us.
Look at where our past took us, boys. The road less traveled has led us all to the fabled corner. Right back to where we started. We went right into the corner together.
Big enough for Hitch.
Big enough for Hitch.
Big enough for Hitch. Great place to end. Listen, if you're watching on YouTube, whichever channel you're watching on, make sure you go over to the Snow the Goalie channel, youtube.com/@SnowTheGoalie. By the way, if you're listening in the podcast feed and you're like, that's just too complicated, I can't see it in front of me because I'm listening through my ear holes and it doesn't make words pop up, that's fair. In the description of this episode, there's a link. It says the episode's here, and it takes you to the playlist on the Snow the Goalie feed. So go subscribe. You can hit the little bell. Anytime we do a live stream this summer, anytime that we drop a new episode this summer, you'll get a notification on your phone, your tablet, your computer, wherever you allow those notifications to go, so you never miss an episode. I cannot stress this enough, okay? There are so many people who watch the show week in and week out between this and the Crossing Broad channel, but only a percentage of those people subscribe to the channel. It's important that you subscribe to it. It helps us out a lot. The other thing is, make sure that you follow the show on your favorite podcast app. So that could be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. We're on Pandora as well. Subscribe to the show or follow it. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a 5-star review. If you're on Spotify, you can click on the show page and then there's a little star rating. You can leave us a 5-star rating there. You can't leave words, but you can always, send us an email at snowthegoalie@gmail.com. That's fine. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/snowthegoalie. You can find us on Twitter @SnowTheGoalie, @AntSanPhilly, @JoyOnBroad, @CTarian6. We're also on Instagram @SnowTheGoalie and at all those handles as well. I believe all those links are also in the description of the episode. we're going to keep this thing going through the summer. Don't hold us to a specific schedule. Can't promise that it'll be every week. Might be every other week. When we have a better idea and we have a schedule lined up, we will make that public on all the social media channels. We might even drop like a little thing in the podcast feed and on the YouTube channel as well to just give you an idea of like, hey, it's now May. We're going to do it on these dates. Or, hey, it's June. We're going to be going every other week until whatever. Might try to do something around the draft. Still remains to be seen. There is a lot still, that needs to be figured out with the Flyers. There's going to be news. They're going to hire a president of hockey ops, all that. They're going to remove that interim tag from Danny Briere, all those things. We'll be back. We'll do shows. If there's something huge that breaks, we'll do an emergency podcast, probably do some live streams. So make sure you follow us, you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Anthony, usually this is the point in the show where you say, Russell, we have some 5-star reviews. I haven't looked. I don't know if we have any new ones.
You know what? We do, but they're from people who've written them before. So I know you don't like to read those, so I'm not gonna suggest.
That's a violation, Bo.
I'm not gonna suggest that you do.
Okay. A reminder to those people who like to leave repeat 5-star reviews. I don't know, like get your kid's phone and leave a 5-star review on their account. I don't know, just throwing it out there. I'm not saying fraudulent or anything, but if you want to leave them, you can leave them. Yeah, I think you're right, because the last one was from the end of March from a first-time reviewer. So listen, if you've spent the summer or you spent the season listening to us and you haven't left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts yet, I don't know, consider doing it. But anyway, for Ant, for Bundy, I'm Russ. We have some fun stories coming in the summer, by the way. Bundy wants to talk about what happened when he got let go from NBC Sports Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, it's a great. I finally found out what happened because it was a mystery. I can't wait to share the story. Man, there's a lot.
There's a bigger story that I'm hoping Anthony lets us talk about at some point here. And it's funny because we mentioned the player on the show earlier today. And boy, there was one hell of a rumor going around about Cam Atkinson this season. And the fun part about that, if and when we get to tell that story, is it's exactly what I said was going to happen. And you'll learn why. But where did that horrible, horrible rumor about an injury that wasn't actually the injury to Cam Atkinson, where did that come from? How did that happen? And why the fuck did somebody lie about it? Well, hopefully we'll get to that this summer. If we don't, it'll be after we're done covering the team and this podcast goes defunct. We'll make sure that we reactivate the podcast feed and we'll drop that episode someday. But I think it might be this summer. We shall see. But trust me, that one is going to be worth sticking around for as well. Anthony, do you have any hot button stories that you want to touch on this summer?
No, Russ, I don't have anything else. Thanks.
He's going to get so many text messages complaining about things that have been said on today's episode. And all I will say is, if you have a problem with me, you send me the text. You give me the call. All right? All right. Listen, thank you for a great year. Thanks for checking out episode number 200 of Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pampers Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the Only Flyers podcast. We wish everyone the best off season coming up. Yep. If you're a hockey fan, wish you the best as you take in the playoffs. If you're a Flyers fan and only a Flyers fan, remember, don't cry that the season is over. Smile because Chuck Fletcher won't be here next year. Thanks for listening to Snow the Goalie. We'll talk to you again very soon.